Everyone has that one story they'd really rather not tell. A specific moment where you just have to look in the mirror and admit, wow, I completely messed up. For me, that moment hit me right in class 10. Between 2017 and 2019, I went through this wild turning point that literally shattered the entire person I thought I was. So today, I'm going to walk you through that exact timeline in this explainer. And look, I'm not here to pump you up with some perfect, polished success story. I want to share how I learned the absolute hardest lessons in the quietest, most painful ways possible.
We usually think failure is loud, right? Like it announces itself with alarms and sirens. But the truth is, real failure, it's usually silent. It gets built on this foundation of tiny, unchecked, totally arrogant decisions. This isn't a story of me suddenly failing overnight. No, this is a story about how I actively built my own downfall brick by literal brick while genuinely thinking I was sitting on top of the world. And honestly, it all started with a basketball.
So, back at the end of Class 9, my school introduced basketball. And I fell head over heels for it. I poured absolutely everything into the sport. I made the school team, and pretty soon after, I was actually named the junior team captain, playing point forward. Looking back at that old basketball jersey now, it brings back really warm memories. But back then, that thing was my absolute armor. Basketball gave me an identity, I felt super capable, powerful, and honestly, I felt completely invincible.
But here's the thing about feeling invincible. It bleeds into everything else. Because my coaching classes were constantly clashing with basketball practice, I made a choice. And it was a very unconventional, pretty risky choice for a student in India. I decided to straight up quit tuition classes entirely in class 10. When people would ask me, hey, how are you going to survive the board exams without coaching? I just had one arrogant response. I'll manage. I convinced my parents at self-study using online resources. Now keep in mind, back in 2018, online learning wasn't exactly the norm. But I was so high on my own confidence, I fully bought into my own illusion of control.
Okay, let's dive into the real catalyst here. Around December 2017, this mobile game called Free Fire launched. I downloaded it instantly. I was a huge early adopter. I even had the t-shirt, which I wore proudly. But just take a step back and look at the situation I had set up for myself. I had absolutely no tuition, complete freedom, and zero structure. And now I had this highly addictive game sitting right in my pocket. Let me tell you, that sudden independence was just intoxicating.
But as you can probably guess, freedom without discipline is an incredibly dangerous combination. The decline was slow, almost invisible actually. By mid-2018, my discipline started slipping. And then, by late 2018, I was flat out ignoring all the warning signs. My gaming dependency was shooting up, totally replacing my academic focus. But here's the trick that overconfidence plays on your brain. Because I was still doing decently well in random school tests, I thought I was totally fine. The massive board exams were creeping up in early 2019, and I was fundamentally terribly underestimating them.
Which brings us right to the night before my very first board exam. The subject was audio, easily my weakest subject. Suddenly, the pressure was extremely real, and my anxiety was just spiking out of control. So instead of studying, I looked for an escape. My friend Arlene and I both had the exam the next day. It was 3 a.m., just the glow of the phone light lighting up a dark room, and instead of opening a textbook, we opened the game.
Honestly, the sheer absurdity of that decision still haunts me today. The plan was supposed to be pulling an all-nighter to study. The reality, Arlene and I played Free Fire until 7 a.m. The exam was at 9 a.m. I still remember this visceral sense of dread hitting my stomach as the sun came up. I literally had 2 hours until I had to sit in an exam hall for a paper I was completely, utterly unprepared for. And worse, that pattern just continued across my exams. I was escaping into gaming simply because I was terrified of facing my own lack of preparation.
Then came the maths exam. Now, maths was my strongest subject, by far. I walked into the exam hall, sat down at my desk, and looked at the paper. And my mind went completely, entirely blank. For 3 agonizing hours, I just sat there in that quiet, empty classroom. I couldn't think. I couldn't write a single thing. It was pure, suffocating panic. The overconfidence had completely collapsed on itself, leaving behind nothing but extreme performance anxiety.
But the real emotional breakdown didn't happen in the hall. It happened when I got back home. Later that exact same day, I sat down at my desk in my room and looked at the very same maths paper. And I solved the whole thing in less than an hour. That realization hit me like a physical punch to the gut.
The blankness in the exam hall wasn't because I didn't know the math. It was a mental freeze born purely from avoidance, from the pressure, and the crushing guilt of my own wasted potential.
So, weeks pass, and finally result day arrives. I wasn't even at home. I was actually surrounded by family at a huge wedding. There were festive, warm lights everywhere, loud music playing, people laughing and celebrating all around me. And right in the middle of all that warmth, I opened my phone to check my board exam results. In my head, all that celebratory music just completely faded out.
77.2%. That was the number staring back at me on the screen. And in that exact second, my ego completely died. Just gone.
To really grasp how heavy that number was, you kind of have to look at everyone else around me. My peers were mostly scoring somewhere between 85 and 95%. And in the Indian education system, dropping down to 77.2% is treated as a massive, undeniable failure. The months that followed that were incredibly dark. I dealt with the public shame, the endless exhausting social comparison, and the quiet judgment from relatives. I lost absolutely all my confidence and hit a really deep emotional low.
But, a massive failure, as incredibly painful as it is, acts as this forced reset. And this brilliantly illustrates how hitting rock bottom forces you to face the hard truths. I learned the hard way that talent means absolutely nothing if you don't have the discipline to back it up. I learned that having total freedom without any structure will eventually destroy you. I finally realized that my overconfidence was really just a mask hiding my true weaknesses. And above all, if you don't respect the opportunities you're given, you will inevitably lose them.
The thing is, real growth only begins after the ego breaks. I had a choice. Let this number define the rest of my life, or rebuild. Step 1 was just fully acknowledging that ego breakdown. Step 2 was a very conscious, drastic move. In November 2019, I quit gaming entirely, just went cold turkey. Step 3, I started preparing seriously for the JEE. And importantly, I stuck to my original guns. I never went back to coaching classes. I decided to finally actually put in the hard work that I claimed I was capable of all along.
So what's the core takeaway from all this? It's simple. Respect what you have, or life will teach you to respect it the absolute hard way. It's so easy to trick yourself into thinking you're the exception to the rule. It's so easy to think, oh, I can always just manage. But trust me, avoidance only breeds anxiety, and eventually the shortcuts are going to run out.
That 77.2% failure fundamentally shaped my mindset. It completely altered my entire trajectory for growth. And I wanted to make absolutely sure I never ever forgot that feeling. It became this permanent, ingrained reminder of humility for me. So when you see me online, when you see my handle, 77.2, well, now you know why.